morning. Hope everyone had a great week. Some of you may be traveling. I got part of my family in this weekend. They'll be here with us for the week. So I'm sure some others the same way. But if you're traveling somewhere, I hope you have great travel and pray for your safety and return to us. Let's go to our Father in prayer as we begin our class this morning. Oh my God, Father in heaven, so thankful for another beautiful day that you seem fit to bless us with. Thankful, Father, we're coming together this morning and to worship you, to give honor and glory to your name, to worship your Son and give praise to him and remember him this morning, Father, and the sacrifice he gave for us. And thankful, Father, that you've given us your word, given us instruction how we are to live our lives. And so thankful that you've taught us ways to guard our hearts and guard our minds, guard our tongues, Father. We pray this morning that we will learn the most from it and that we'll go out into our everyday lives and through our relationships, even here with our own selves and our own congregation, and be better stewards of your word and be better stewards, Father, of the things we say. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen. Well, you're going to notice some of these things are just recognizable from the very beginning. This is the very first slide that we started out with, talking about great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people. So, my question is, this is going to be my last class teaching today. Derek's he's going to teach chapter 15, which has to do with Christ's example. Because we know that Christ, he was slandered, he was gossiped about. His entire time he started his ministry, started teaching, that he would, and eventually all of it took him to the cross. But just asking this question of you, have you learned anything? Has it done anything since you've been going through these lessons the past few weeks? Has it changed your perspective once you've left here? Once you've gone out to your lives? Has it made you think differently? I'm seeing some nodding heads. How? Can anybody want to share how that has changed the way you think and the way you talk and the way you've done since the beginning? Huh? More mindful? Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times at work here recently, just doing that, but like, they know in my inner circle in there in the administration office, know that I've been teaching this class. And I said, do I need to bring y'all a lesson? It's just almost every day. But it's something. Somebody's always talking. Anybody else? Anybody got anything else that's maybe changed their mind, changed their perspective about things? Quiet people.
Just a small comment.
What's that?
A small comment can hurt more than you think.
Yeah. And like I say, it takes one small word. It doesn't take much, to hurt somebody else. It started off this whole thing about whispering, the sin of gossip. And this is the whole image on the front of the book. If you have that, these women talking about one there. Of course, I told you it doesn't, stay with them. Men do it too. You go through all the scriptures, and a lot of the scriptures that come up start talking about women and the men being idle and the widows and stuff like that. But it's not just them; it's us guys. We can do it just as bad or worse. And we talked about the definition of it. A person, the Merriam-Webster definition. A person who visually reveals personal or sensational facts about others. And, of course, a rumor or report of intimate nature. We may know something that is very true about somebody, but they gave you that information in confidence. And once you share it with somebody else, now it's public knowledge that maybe they didn't want out there. They trusted you with it. And Nathan Peeler, the author of this, this lesson, this book, he said, gossip is when one shares information, whether true or false, that could cause great harm to a certain individual. We talked about Opie's newsletter. And what got me the most about this little episode, and I actually pulled it up and watched it. I had to do my research, So I pulled up and watched the show. And that the fact that they were torn up about Opie writing a letter about all the things that the people said in town, but it was okay for him to write the same stuff about his own little friends at school. We didn't curb the problem. We just don't want you talking about the adults. That's not an adult thing. You shouldn't be talking about these things. But it's okay to do the same thing now that you're a child. Said from the beginning, we need everybody in here and our teenagers right up front. Because I took this to the, funny enough, I took this lesson to Morning Point this past Sunday afternoon. And I asked the question, said, when do you think you first started to gossip? And my answer to that was when you could first form an opinion about somebody else. When you had in your mind that you could have an attitude or something that you could think about and you formed an opinion about somebody else is when you started saying things about them and talking about them and bringing their stories up, things that, that you could share that other people wanted to hear. And then it's been, yes.
About thinking wrong about somebody. Now, we know if we think somebody's doing something wrong, we have to go to them. But Paul condemns thinking wrong about somebody. We can't think anything we want. If we do think they're doing wrong, we have to go to them. But it's kind of like last week you had up, hatred comes before murder, grudges come before, I should know that one, grudges come before something else. But we think something wrong usually about somebody before we gossip.
Yeah.
That's condemned. I think we can think whatever we want as long as we don't say it. But we can't.
All right. There's going to be plenty of thoughts you're going to have run through your mind about somebody. But when it comes out as something verbal for somebody else to hear and to share, then it's, it may be just as simple sometimes to think about it, just to harbor it, but you definitely don't want to say it. Right. No. Yeah. All right. If you got that in your heart and you have that, well, you can just call it evil in your heart. Yeah. You got that evil in your heart and you harbor in your heart. The same thing is you think about our worship, our God is worthless. Yeah, Ricky.
You just talked about when Opie did the paper. I don't know if you remember the episode, I forgot which one it was, Baby Griffith, when I think Otis and his friend, especially I don't know if it was like that had done with that was in the episode about the haunted house, and him and his friend was making moonshine or something.
Yep.
And then the ladies, I don't know if it's a different kind of episode, but the ladies, they told off on Otis and got him arrested, but they was making it.
Yeah, that was a totally different show.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was a totally different one, exactly. But it's just like the things we have about or think about somebody, yeah. that evil sitting in your heart, one, if you say it, makes it even worse. But you got to get it out of your heart. You know, you're going to have to pray. You're going to have to get into some deep prayer about something. And maybe if it is in your heart, maybe you need to go to that person. You know, if this is something you're thinking, they might be able to tell you something that goes, oh, well, that shouldn't have been what I was thinking all along. You know, they may fix that for you. But, you know, think about this. You know, Norman Rockwell puts that up there. You know, all these people talking, you know, it starts with one person saying it and the other one going, you should have come to me about that first. You know, comes all the way around and back to the same person again. And then we learn some here, you know, the wisdom of Solomon. Some of the things he said about that. You know, Proverbs says that gossip goes about telling secrets, but no one who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a confidence. So just saying that thing, you know, somebody tells you something, they meant it to be in confidence, but one who is trustworthy in spirit would keep it. Otherwise, they're just going to spread the lies or spread whatever it is you told them. So the gossip reveals secrets, therefore do not associate with a babbler. Knowing not to go out and even associate with somebody that is going to spread gossip around. If they're coming to you with things, you know, it's telling us that don't listen, don't associate, just walk away. We told them, I said, but it feels so good. You know, we told them, I said, you know, people won't come up and say something and they're trying to get you enticed about it, want to talk to you about it. And said, did you hear about something? And I, well, no. And you're either going to be intrigued enough to stand there and listen to the next words that come out of their mouth and want to, you know, because you're enticed now. It's interesting to you. You want to know. But then I said, well, the way I heard it. Now, if that is your response, you've already heard it from somebody else and you've already engaged. Think about that. If that is your response, well, the way I heard it, you've already heard a variation of whatever story that they just told you, which means now you're engaged again with somebody else. You know that little triangle of fire we talked about? Around and around and around it goes. You know, hey, you want to know what? And guess what? Let me tell you something. And the other one says, you're going to want to hear this. And think about it. You're going to want to hear this meant that you wanted to hear something that they had to say about somebody before. So they know that you're that someone that they can come and spread some more stuff to. They can go ahead and start talking again because you're going to receive it and probably be willing to spread it as well. But it's say, ooh, but it tastes so good. And in Proverbs, it tells us is the words of a whisperer are like dainty morsels, and they go down to the innermost parts of the body. Meaning, you'll take that sweet morsel in because it tastes so good. You'll swallow it down. You feel it all the way down to the bottom until it hits, and just, oh, that's great. I want another bite of it. We talked about your body's response to things that you like, that you want to go back for more because it's just a natural response. But there's other things that make the same response. You know, love towards somebody makes the same response as telling something about somebody. So we talked about some motivations. Who can name off some of the ones we talked about that were motivations for gossip? Huh? Connections. There we go. Sense of false connection. What's another one? Don't like them. Just simply don't like them. What's another one? Give you a hint. There were initially 6 of them. So we got 2 of them. Huh? Yeah, well, there's usually when you're responding or wanting to do that is, yeah, I want to keep myself at least on par level or higher than they are. During these, jog your memory, you're jealous of them. You know, part of that talking about wanting to be a little on a higher level. You know, something about them makes you want what they have or want to be in the position that they are. And just so you can dial them down a notch or two, you'll talk about them, or, talk about them to somebody else or have bad thoughts about them. Holding a grudge against somebody. Somebody did you wrong. Well, it tells us, particularly for us, as a Christian family, somebody did you wrong, then you need to be in that person's front door. You need to be going to them and talking to them about this. In some way, you're going to have to lay that grudge down. We're talking about we just simply don't like them. And usually talking about don't like them, it's not liking something that about them or something they do. And you transfer it on to the person. If you can transfer off what it is you don't like about what they do or something about it, it's not necessarily not liking that one. But there you go. You simply dislike them. Confusion and curiosity, that you see something going on, you're kind of confused about it. Curiosity, and we usually make up stuff then to fill in the blanks. And that's what starts the talking. Desire to be in the know. You want to know everything about everybody. And of course, that false sense of connection. We talked about wisdom and silence. Whoever restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding. Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent. The first time I read that, I just laughed at it because, I had heard, a recent joke at the time that says, light travels faster than sound. That's why most people appear bright until they open their mouth. So, this kind of goes along that. I told those ladies out there at the Morning Point this, and they just laughed. I said, well, God had the joke first. He knew about people. He knew about us. It tells us that, it's best just to keep your mouth shut, and appear wise. Nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light. And what you have whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed on the housetops. You brood of vipers, how can you speak when you are evil? For out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The good person out of his good treasure brings forth good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure brings forth evil. Just like Gail was speaking about, having that information that you're harboring in your heart and you're thinking bad about somebody. Well, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. That's pretty heavy for me, because we do a lot of talking. We do a lot of talking. So getting into what is actually supposed to be for this lesson today, talk about overcoming gossip. And the quote for this day was this scripture: whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. So as we've gone through also, there have been some tips that he's given us along the way, Peeler has, for overcoming gossip, for defeating gossip. So, again, can you remember what things we have been given so far that tells us how we can defeat gossiping about somebody? Everybody's got in mind, I really don't recall. Spit anything out. Anybody.
Say no.
Just say no. Yeah. Just say no. Anybody else? All right. Guarding your heart and your tongue. If you can keep the evilness and whatever out of your heart, it likely won't come out your mouth. You know, guard your heart and your tongue. Another one, love and friendship overcome gossip. You know, if you put as much energy into loving someone and building relationships and building friendships, the likelihood about you gossiping about them is a lot less. You know, because you're not going to spread that evil about them. You don't want to spread things about them. Refusing to listen, just say no. Now that person walks up and wants to tell you something, I don't want to hear it. You know, I told you about that lady that, you know, here comes this awful stuff that is on Facebook. It was a video, and people are asking about, you know, did you hear about this? I was like, no. They asked me if I heard about a fight, and the reason I didn't know who it was about. And then it all came out, who it was about. I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. You know, it never was spoke about again after that day. I don't even know if she's still working with Murray Regional. I have no idea. I don't know if that ended her career or if she's still there. Had no idea. But nobody's talked about it. Nobody's ever said a word more. They never asked me about it again because I'm like, I don't want to hear it. No, just don't listen. Being a peacemaker, we talked about how hard that actually is. It's way harder to keep peace and build relationships and keep a solid foundation than it is to just tear it all down. You know, be a peacemaker. Go to the source. Go to that person. Ask them, is this true? Don't believe everything you hear. You know, the funny is, I don't know if anybody, I follow football, all right? Guilty. I love sports. I love football. And here near the end of this season, we got the Heisman Trophy race out there. And Diego Pavia was one of those that was, you know, well, he came in second, as they said, you know, in the race for that, in the voting. This thing comes up on Facebook on me. It says, suing. That he was suing the NCAA for not winning the trophy. That is not true. He is suing the NCAA, but it's because of his junior college, you know, so he wants to have another year of eligibility. But it made it out like he was suing the NCAA because he didn't win the Heisman Trophy and he was being a big baby about it. You know how many comments from people or friends that I have on Facebook that I know were making all these, that thug, this, and that. They weren't getting into the information, the actual facts. But you can find the actual facts about things, but he's not doing that. But that's what happened. You know, put that thing out there. We talk about carrying each other's burdens. Somebody's going to lay a load on you sometimes. And even, we talk about Derek said, you want to go to that person, you got to be willing to accept my help. I want to come and help you shoulder that burden. And it's meant for you to carry the load, not shuck it off on somebody else's shoulders for them to have part of it. You know, that's what it's about. And remembering the judgment of God, you will be held accountable for every word you say. So he gives us 3 more tips to end this out. He says, tips for defeating gossip. 3 more to consider. One is what we call a helpful filter. So I'm going to read you a little something here. And of course, he brings up this reference from Socrates. He said, really don't know actually how it surfaced because it's not in any Greek literature, but it kind of goes this way. And he kind of laid out like a friend was talking to Socrates. But it said, a man approached Socrates on the street and he wanted to share some information about one of his friends. And the man was about to blurt out what he had heard. And Socrates stopped him and asked him 3 questions. So Socrates says, is what you're about to tell me about my friend true? Well, the man on the street says, I don't know. I only recently heard it and I have not had not had time to investigate it if it was accurate. Socrates said, is the information you want to pass about my friend something good and positive? The man told him and says, it most certainly is not good. Socrates, so you want to tell me something bad about my friend that might be false. Still, there is one more way that the information might be useful to me. He said, is it necessary? He said, even though it is bad and could be false, could this information be useful so that I could help my friend in some way? Well, the man on the street says, no. In the end, saying Socrates walked away, refusing to listen to the gossip about his friend. He says, let us take a moment to examine it. So, all right. So is it true? So do we stop and ask this question on a consistent basis? Is it true? When somebody comes up and wants to talk to you about something, do we immediately ask that question? Is it true? He says, my experience has been when I have asked if information being given is reliable, most of the time I am told this story was like from the 14th hand. You ever seen this exercise where you tell somebody, you whisper some kind of information and somebody's here on this side, and they pass off that information all the way until it gets up, through 14, 15, 20, how many people, and by the time you get to the other end, it's only got a less than an ounce of validity of what you said in the beginning. That the information that you gave does not come out, right on the other end. And this is what he's saying about this. We say, or if I ask who originally told them that all of a sudden the source must be kept anonymous for national security reasons. I can't tell you who told me. They told me not to tell. Well, what are you telling me for? This person's supposed to be kept secret. They can't, I can't tell you who told me. Then I don't need to know either. It's kind of one. All right, so he also said, talk about, is it good? Come on, is it good? He said, I've never had anybody rush up to me to tell me some great virtue of something somebody's done great for somebody else. It's just not within us, It doesn't make us feel so great to tell something good about somebody as it does to tell somebody something juicy, something that somebody wants to, dwell upon and think upon and spread around and whatever. So nobody wants to come and tell you anything good. Said no one's excited to share that kind of information. So why is it that we enjoy sharing stories that cast others or cast bad light on others? Why is it that we do that? Yeah. We've got our own problems in our own lives, and we are not the best people either, are we? So if we can just tell some little lie or tell something bad, or really, it may be even true, about somebody else, well, that just equals the playing field, doesn't it? Yeah. They're just as bad as I am, so let's make sure everybody else knows that they're just as bad as I am. Is it helpful? Now, the one thing he does bring out, and Peter does bring out in this, that it may not be true, but it could be helpful, at least in a way that makes me go and approach my friend, approach this person to ask them what the truth is. Maybe it is something that once I get there, I find out it's not true. Maybe I find out that it is, and maybe there's something that I can do to help them. And again, that shouldering of the burden, going and to that person and validating what information is there. The other one gives it says, don't start. Proverbs 17:14 says, the beginning of strife is like letting out water. So quit before the quarrel breaks out. You know, some of these things we talk about, we just blurt out and there's no stopping it. All right? But that little simple gesture somebody gives you to just think about it like a trickle of water. You ever seen, I guess before, you know, you got water dammed up, you got something, you make just a little bit of cut in the dam or whatever, and it just starts running. And it's just a little. And the longer it runs, the faster it gets, because it keeps making the chasm that you've got there wider and wider and wider until the whole dam breaks loose and lets everything go. You know, my granddad years ago had a 5-acre lake out behind his house. And he got thinking, I got 5 acres of soybeans out here I could be planting. I need that money. So he drained the lake. Had a levee on the backside. They cut just a small part of it and then got out of the way because the water took care of the rest. 5 acres of water was down the ditch and out in the fields before you ever knew it. It was gone and down the creek and well gone. And if we had been in the way, it would have been like that proverbial tsunami coming right over the top of it, because it took the levee out in a hurry. Once it started rolling, it took the whole thing out. So you can think about that for us. And think about that one little thing it said. If you can stop it in the beginning, you might, avert the flood. He puts in a little quote from a song that he heard. And it says, "It is always he said, she said, that you said, I said, and we said. Once you started, it won't stop, whether you like it or not." So consider the cost. He tells a story here. It says, in a small European town, a man took every opportunity to speak ill of a rabbi. So one day the man had a drastic change of heart and begged the rabbi for forgiveness. The rabbi instructed him to go home, get a feather pillow, cut it open, scatter the contents to the wind, and return to see him. The man followed the rabbi's instructions and returned, asking if he was now forgiven. "Almost," said the rabbi. "The only thing you have to do now is gather all the feathers." "Well, that's impossible," the man objected. They've been scattered all over the countryside. "Precisely. You truly wish to correct the evil you have done. It is as impossible to repair the damage done by your words as it is to recover the feathers." I don't know if you've ever heard this analogy before, but I heard it's told as a story. An old man had a son that repeatedly would say things that hurt people, said things, piercing to his wife, piercing to him, to his mom, to his siblings. And he one day tells him, says, here's what I want you to do. Every time you say something bad about somebody, you get angry and say angry words about somebody, or you spread lies, I want you to go put a nail in a fence post. So he did that for a long time. So he comes up to him one day and said, "Now I want you to go out every time that you apologize, every time you say something nice, every time you take these words back, I want you to go pull a nail from the post." So he does. He starts going pulling the nails from the post. But the problem you see there, we still have nails. We still have nails in the post that never were taken out. We have scars that were left behind because the nails that you drive, the piercing things that you say, are never forgotten. So from that, words wound. They hurt people. They hurt families. They hurt individuals. They just hurt. They will wound. Wounds will heal. Sometimes around the piercing thing that's there. I got a big old shard of wood in my hand one time, and it healed completely around it, and I could still feel it moving around. I had to go get it cut out. People go, "Oh." Yeah, it was there. I could move it back and forth. I gripped something and it would hurt. It would remind me every time I gripped on a hammer, oh, it's still there. Same thing here. You drive it in there. But in the end, healing scars. How many people have got things, got stitches, and still see the place where the wound was? I've got plenty of them over time. But the things we say are going to hurt people, depending upon what you do and how you say it. You're going to leave those wounds. They may heal behind, and you may get it over time. But the healing scars, you never forget. You know, we say God does. He forgets the sin. He forgets what you ask him of, but we don't. We can go ask for apology and forgiveness on that, but we just don't forget. It's always there. We're so historical. So, benefit of the doubt. So think of this right now. I want you to give me some real life, real world examples of why you think somebody arrives late. They arrive late to work. What is your first response, Derek? Is why somebody arrived late to work? Traffic. Okay. That might actually be a good excuse. Especially in Nashville. Maybe in Columbia now. What's another one? Why would they arrive late? They slept in. They just didn't get up on time. You know, I've had some people, you know, that I work with that told me, I said, you know, it just takes me so long to get here. I said, I'm like, as far as I know, your clock works the same as mine. Just set it for 30 minutes earlier. You'll probably arrive on time. Maybe, maybe not. The point of the whole discussion is we usually come up with a whole lot of wrong ideas or bad ideas of why it is they showed up late. Whether it be here, you know, people roll into church late, they come in the last minute, they sit, you know, plop themselves in the back of the pew, wherever that may be, or they arrive to work later. It doesn't matter. You tell them, you'll be late to your own funeral. You know, that's kind of the thing that comes out, that you're just going to be late. But we just don't, you know, we made a lot of excuses, but in the end, for ourselves, you know, we're pretty forgiving of our own flaws. You know, we think of things, you know, that are bad about it, but we're pretty forgiving of ourselves. You know, we can make excuses about why we did certain things. And we pretty much give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. We also don't give up on ourselves. But what if, just what if, you make exceptions for the person? You know, you're not thinking bad about them all the time. You make exceptions for them. It says, you know, they are late because, well, they work 2 jobs and try to juggle family life. Perhaps a word of encouragement would do them some good. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You know, I'm going to let that snarky remark they made slide. It was probably nothing. They might just be having a bad day. You know, somebody comes up and smarts off to you, well, maybe their day just didn't start out so good. Ever been there? I've been there. See a lot of nodding heads. Yeah, everybody's been there. All right. And don't give up on them. It says, you know, they're behind on the project, but they do good work. Perhaps I should remind them that we value having them on our team. So I should remind them that we value them. You know, well, excuse me. Maybe we should have something going on that caused them to slip behind. Or I could take them out to eat to strengthen our relationship, and, you know, so they need to talk. I can be there for them. You know, don't give up on them. We may be coming to the end of this quicker than I want. Right back to the beginning, sin of gossip. You know, I was, I had to say this, I was asked this a couple of times. Is there something going on in our congregation I need to know about? Is there somebody, are people, you know, spreading gossip around, you know? Is there something happening? I'm like, no. I just thought it was an interesting topic. You know, Clay brought this book to me, or brought this book up at one of our elders' meetings. We're talking about classes and things that we wanted to maybe present for this year. And as things, situations occurred, you know, the Lovealls, you know, Brandon Loveall was going to teach this quarter. And, you know, their family, they're worshiping with Graymere currently. So we needed to fill in. I was like, I'll do it. But he was going to be teaching on the home. How many lessons have we heard on the home? A lot. Is it important? It is. But I saw this one. And Clay was like, man, we did this up here at Dixon. It went off really well. You know, had a really good, you know, had some good discussion. They thought it was a good class, fun class. And how many times have you heard lessons, even preached from the pulpit, about gossip? Maybe saying something about the tongue and, you know, in passing in one of the things you ought not to do. And I have to say, this class, a lot of it turned into, maybe it's a lot of redundancy. I don't think we can hear it enough. I really don't. I don't think we can hear it enough about what we should do concerning what we say about our brethren, about our family members, about our co-workers, about anybody. I just don't think it can be heard enough. Because it's something that we do repeatedly every day. You know, you got these things talking about adultery and murder and thief, you know, being a thief and all these different things that it's talking about, and gossip thrown in right in the middle of them. There's not a one of us out here who thinking maybe, hopefully would. That's probably one of the sins that more so that would come up with adultery. There's not too many of us going to go out there and steal things from our neighbors. It's unlikely that you're going to go out and murder somebody. But it's pretty prevalent that you probably go out and speak about somebody. All right. I said the thing, how many people have been talking about me since this class has been going on? You know, and thinking about why are we talking about this? Because it is worth it. It is totally worth it to talk about how we talk about people. You know, I started beginning this class. And, you know, the previous slides always had that funny little snake right there in the corner. Because in the beginning, you know, the very first slide we had that mean, kind of evil-looking snake. And I tell you, Jade hates snakes. Hates them with a passion. Will not even look at them in a video, a picture. She will avert her eyes because she hates to look at them. Maybe it not be another animal out there that she hates as bad, but she will not look at a snake. She's just like, ooh. Just gives her the shivers. But that thing's standing in the background, just over the top of them. Get that image in your mind that he's there, that he's waiting, you know.
As perhaps pornography for somebody else. This is a